You guys are busy during the 2000s introducing new models, nylon strings for the first time.
Nylon
strings. Did you have to learn how to build a nylon string? Is it different than a steel string? I know it's a silly question, but I'm goading you to an answer here.
It's super different. It's about as different as an organ is to a piano. You know, you put your fingers in the same place to play the same chords, right? Nylon strings are what got us through the 9/11, post 9/11 year. Everything sort of fell apart. Maybe Kurt remembers it differently, but it was a new model. We got to sell a lot of them because it was new. People brought them in, and its sales post 9/11 was just kind of a hard year, as I remember. And nylon strings made a big difference that year. It gave us something that wasn't just another steel string of a different color. Do you have any recollection about that?
I'm not sure if it's something that TJ wanted us to do for sales, or if you were thinking, you know, there's such a big market of people who play nylon string guitar, we need to have something for that market.
I think we introduced it at the January NAMM, and I think it was a combination of all of that, a perfect storm. But I distinctly remember thinking that post 9/11 was really a doldrums for us. And we had 3 months to get ready for the next year. And that's what I turned my attention on.
Okay.
I felt a sense of urgency. Now, that doesn't mean it wasn't a sort of a pent-up hope that I could make a nylon string sometime. And it turned into a hybrid guitar, narrower neck, that type of thing. I would still like to make a full-on classical Spanish guitar sometime in that way, but we continue to kick that can down the road. And with Andy here, who's a better guitar maker than I am, I know I've got complete confidence that when we do, it'll be a completely legit guitar. And our Academy series nylon that we do now, that is Andy brace, the brace is Andy's design. That's a legitimate nylon string guitar, you know.
Yep.
It really, really is. And so, yeah, a lot of times these things come about with 30% this, 30% that, 30% that, and then just a little push over the top. Don't ever think that that the need to survive isn't a good prodder to go ahead and do something now. You know, Taylor guitars throughout our entire history, I think Kurt said it really well a little while ago. It's like out of every 5 years, you have a bad year, you have a good year, and you have 3 years that are just like waking up and making it happen every day.
Yeah, it kind of seems that way.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, the decade of the 2000s, you had 9/11. Fast forward to 2008, you had the biggest economic...
Y2K.
Yeah, Y2K. Yes, that's true. Yeah, had to get through Y2K, but then you had the greatest economic crisis since the Great Depression, you know, and the credit markets blew up. I mean, COVID has been impactful beyond measure in its own ways, but there are some big global events that impacted the business and impacted consumers and impacted everybody. And
yeah, there always are.
You had to respond. You weren't just going to take it sitting down, you know, and you had work to do, and you responded with guitars and new designs and new things to get people to say, hey, we make this great stuff. And I didn't realize that the nylon string guitar was a response to reinvigorate guitar players and get them looking your way.
It's when I think of our nylon string guitar, I think of 9/11. I think of that was my world. That was what was going on in my head.
I'd forgotten about that, but yeah.
Yeah, we're in, like Andy says, we're in the business of being in business. The guitar is such an artistic tool, an artistic expression, that it's hard for fans of our company to somehow be able to sort of blend that in with the need to be in business, the need to sell, the need to have a profit, the need to make your expenses, the need to grow, the need to do all of these things, because that stuff all sounds so business-like. But a guitar is not a business-like thing to own. It's not even like a car. You might love your car, but it's like it gets me from here to there. I want to enjoy it as much as possible. 5 years from now, I'm going to get rid of it and get a different one, can't wait for the new thing to come out. But guitars, they hit people differently, and they kind of maybe another analogy is the music business. The music business has sort of a bad connotation. Music has a great connotation, but music wouldn't exist to the greater public without it being a business, and guitars wouldn't be available without it being a business. So it's sort of the unsexy side. And I like to talk about that because it's like talking about reality. And you plan for the future, and when things get tight, like some of the things we've talked about, the guitar that somebody has serves them quite well. And guitars last for a long time. So in reality, there's this buildup of used guitars out there that's enormous. Can you think of an easier time there's ever been to buy almost any guitar you want used? There's just all kinds of ways to do it.
Yep.
Besides going in and getting a guitar brand new in a store. And so we're in competition with ourselves. And so we like to change models. And since we've changed models, morphed our guitars, advanced our guitars for years, I think we have the easiest time doing that. Some of the people that are friends and people that built the other factories, the brands, they're some of the best friends I have in my life. So when I talk about those brands freely, it's because I respect them. I like them. I like those people, But when you make let's say Martin, for example, their customers get a little bit upset when a D28 changes. And, we're on our probably 10th version of an 814 CE, and people are like, well, we just expect it. We're forgiven. And it's funny how your customers hold you to account for what it is that they want out of you. And the way you act, it either codifies that to where that's the way, there's a tacit agreement, you're going to keep doing that, or you break that rule and you move on. And we've broken our rules a lot just to sell and just to make things interesting.
All right, guys, let's bring it back to guitars, as we like to do.
Yeah, this is a lot of guitar talk.
Amplifying an acoustic guitar is a unique challenge. And the expression system, ES, was born in the 2000s. Maybe a long runway leading up to that, but tell me how that came to be and what kind of problems did it solve?
Kurt, do you remember the article in, maybe it was Fret's magazine, long, long time ago, when the introduction, the writer said, Taylor Guitars, a reluctant supplier to the acoustic guitar industry or acoustic guitar category. But back then, people knew, Kurt found out by visiting dealers that people wanted acoustic electric guitars.
In our guitars, anyway.
They did in our guitars.
Maybe not everybody's, but in our guitars, they wanted to pick up. And you go back to like Ovation, the secret of their success, you didn't have to stand in front of a mic, to play it. Mm-hmm. And they had a big, long run of success, too, with their, because their guitars were easy to play live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was from dealers. They said, you need pickups in your guitars. And I think we started with Barkus Berry. I don't think they were hot dots. It was something different.
No, they were under the saddle.
Okay.
They were under the saddle.
And we worked with those a while, and then we met Lloyd.
And in between that, remember Bill Bartolini.
Oh, yeah, Bill Bartolini.
May he rest in peace.
Yeah,
he just passed away recently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bill Bartolini was...
he made preamps for us.
And was that with the Barkus Berry
Uh-huh.
pickup? Yeah, he designed and made preamps for us. That's
Maybe
right.
he even did it for some Lloyd pickups. We were using Lloyd pickups, Lloyd bags. We went from Barkus Berry to Lloyd bags. That's when the bottom was brass and the top was poured graphite. And we tended to have tall saddles on our guitars, and sometimes that thing would snap off, and then it was a super glued piece of micarta on there. 1/8-inch saddle. Fishman came around and was making the thin line pickup for Martin, and it was a 3/32nd.
Lloyd's was
thing.
an 1/8, right?
It was an 1/8, and I liked the 1/8. That gave us more room for our compensation, which we needed. It's kind of funny, just a tangent. The first compensated saddle was this one that we did. That was the back two back, the middle two forward, the B all the way back, the high E all the way forward. And now you see we've transitioned to a totally different saddle than that now. It's more of a wave. It's 3D carved, and it's not just this notch thing. But you see that saddle, that was our first saddle, on almost every guitar that's out there now, just exact copies
We were
of
the
that.
first ones to do it.
Yeah, we were.
I didn't
Maybe some
remember
people had some compensation, but it wasn't common. Martin and Gibson and the big companies did, and they were just a rounded saddle. It helped our intonation. And remember, our guitars got a reputation of good intonation back in the same time that it got a reputation for not being too bassy, which when people like that tone, they like it. When they don't, they say it's got no soul, right? Mm-hmm. And our necks and our action, the intonation was sort of like this hallmark of our guitars. And I like that 1/8-inch saddle, but we kept having trouble with if that saddle broke off. And, Lloyd had other customers that he didn't have that trouble with, but we couldn't get that thing buried in our bridge enough for it to not be up too high. And if that broke off, somebody lost their guitar and their pickup. They couldn't even play the guitar. Mm-hmm. And then Larry Fishman kept talking, it'd be great if you used our stuff. And I go, Larry, you don't make an 1/8-inch pickup. You make a thin line for Martin. Yeah, I know. And 2-3 years went by, and finally, once at a NAMM show, I mentioned it again. He goes, Bob, I'll do it, right? And I've been dear friends with Larry and Lloyd for all these years. And Larry and Lloyd really completely developed the aftermarket and then the OEM pickup. Meanwhile, sort of a byproduct of Ovation, Takamine, because Command became a major shareholder of Takamine.
That's right.
Has the Takamine pickup, which is probably more well respected in the market than kind of nobody has anything bad to say about a Takamine pickup on their guitars. Really, really good stuff. And
we had the problem with Lloyd's. The saddles were breaking off, and it reached the point where it was became unreliable. And we ended up moving to Fishman, and we felt horrible about it. And you had to make the call to Lloyd. We stopped and saw Lloyd in August, heading up to Monterey, got a tour of his shop, went out to lunch and talked about that, what had happened.
Yeah.
Because it was happening a lot. I mean, it practically put him out of business when that happened, because he was having to replace them all. They were failing, couldn't figure out what it was. It was the same glue that he'd been using, and he thought they'd changed it. What it turned out was he put the glue on a shelf, if I have this right, and at a certain time of day in the afternoon, the sun would come and it would hit it, and it would get hot. So then it wouldn't cure right, and it became brittle. And it all had to do with where he was storing the glue on a shelf. He didn't figure that out till later. And he went through having to replace all these saddles, struggling to get through that, and honor his commitments and stay in business. And it all had to do with the glue, the sun hitting the glue.
Those types of things have happened to us. I feel his pain. And anybody that we're mentioning in this podcast, this is a long podcast of our history. Yeah. And any of these colleagues or vendors or friends that we mention, if they sat down and did this podcast, it would be equally interesting. The struggle is every bit as real. The triumphs and failures are monumental in their lives. Yeah. And what somebody like Lloyd or Larry does to get there, and what they lived through to get there in a
It's
burgeoning
unbelievable.
industry that wasn't developed, and them having to invent all of this stuff. And worse yet, putting their guitar as an OEM or their pickup as an OEM product on somebody else's brand. And then that brand feeling like they're having success. Or if, the thing is if a pickup fails, people don't really go away saying my pickup failed. They say my Taylor failed. And that's hard for us. But think how hard it is for Lloyd.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And I know because Segway, we started making pickups, and guess what? They failed. So I know what he went through. There was a lot of failure in that whole entire thing. And then when you get to a point where there's not failure, then there's the line of I hate it and I love it. One guy's like, you can read chat rooms and it's like, oh, I love my this, and I plug in, and then the next, you go down 5, and then it's like their pickups suck. I don't know when they're going to change, and then it gets back to people loving their Taylors and that type of thing, right? And that's the world we live in. People have their taste, and but there's a big difference between something working or not working, and whether somebody likes it or doesn't like it. That's a huge, huge difference. And both of them are painful, but I'm more impervious to the harm by somebody not liking it, than it just not working, right? And so
we're making a lot of guitars with pickups.
Well, yeah, and remember, I have to mention the Listug box because people wanted better guitars early on, and one thing led to another. I knew a sound guy at our church that were using these PZM mics, pressure zone sensitive mics, and he would put them in this little piece of, plexiglass like this, and put this thing, and it didn't touch. And it would be on the stage, and it could pick up a choir or something like that because there's this zone of pressure. And Crown made those mics, and I experimented around with those, putting them in a guitar and holding them off of the top of the guitar. But since they were moving with the guitar, the pressure zone wasn't so great. And then we turned it into a Crown microphone that went in the sound hole and a Fishman pickup, and we wanted to blend those. And you went down to Radio Shack because you were sort of a Heathkit guy, and you bought resistors and diodes and XLRs and a project box and came and wired these things. And we made the first blender box. You made the control. Yeah, and we called them Listug boxes, and they were great.
It was for Harvey Reid and Dan Carrier, the two guys that wanted it, because they wanted a more natural sound. So it was how do you put a microphone in the guitar and the pickup and be able to blend them? And it wasn't Crown, it was Audio-Technica.
It was Crown at first, and then it became Audio-Technica.
There was a guy named Bob that Dan Shepard introduced me to. And they sold me just the elements.
Yeah.
The microphones. And it would just be on a piece of like electrical cable. Remember that? Just a little clip on a piece of like red.
Yep.
Red wire to mount it in there. And I somehow figured out how to do it where it had batteries or you could supply phantom power from the board that would power the mic, which is amazing to think about. But yeah, I just made these little boxes for those guys. And it was
a little gray Audio-Technica mic. Maybe when you did it, it was like that. I still have in my 1975 810 with 2 holes left over that don't have the Bartolini pickup anymore. I've got a Crown mic and a Fishman pickup, and then a Fishman blender, which was Larry Fishman. That's when we said, we shouldn't be making Listug boxes, Larry. You should make this blender.
Yeah, what I did predated his blender.
Yeah.
Is that right?
And then, it was like, you should make, it's kind of like the filler that we and everybody use for our UV coatings. You've got to fill the grain with something paste-like, and nobody made anything like that. So we made it. We just put this product called Cavasil. It's a siliconized glass, powdered, salted. It's fine, like flour. But you put it in resin, and it makes it thicker. So we just made Vaseline thickness top coat, rubbed it in, and then we go to the finish companies. Why are we making this? You should make this, right? And that's kind of what happened with the Listug box, which Harvey and Chris named it, and Dan, right? Dan Carreri. And I think, is there a list? There should be a Listug box in our...
Well, when I got one from Harvey Reid last year, and Andy has it.
Definitely needs to be in our museum. Yeah. And so I still have a guitar with the Fishman blender on it that could put on a mic stand. And that was going along well. But then he came with his, maybe it was a blender right in the side. And then it became just a pickup, more models. His stuff wasn't as good then as it is now. His stuff's way better now. Our stuff's way better now. Lloyd's stuff's way better now. And it was during the time when we were working with Clint Black, and he had about 5 of our guitars, but he was complaining that every one he picked up was different than the other one, and the sound guy's just like, I can't do it. I mean, it was the same system. And the way that we solved that was Dave Hostler and Terry Myers took 2 shopping bags with preamps and pickups to Clint's house, and they spent a day randomly trying to build a set of 5 that sounded the same. And they did.
Wow.
They did it. It was just a process of matching, right? And that's actually a legit process if it's not left to the customer. I always tell the story of the Dollar Watch Company, World War I, when, World War II also was the first time anybody ever experienced jet lag, because there was no way to get someplace fast before that. And it was between those two that watches were handmade because gears were bad, and you had to file each one to fit the other one and adjust it. And some American company called the Dollar Watch Company we got to be able to make a watch for $1 so a GI can afford to buy one. And they said, here's our technology. The parts are bad. And the way they fixed it was by matching. They came down assembly line, and these women and men would build a set of, if this one was off, they would find one that's off the other way. And they built sets out of parts that weren't exact, right? And they made watches that worked. They didn't file them to redo, and that's kind of what we did that day. We built sets of pickups and preamps to match 5. And Dave Hostler came home and said, we got to make our own pickups. And I said, okay.
Well, you also had the issue of balancing the output from the guitars.
Well, that's what they were trying to do.
Okay.
And the way that they made a set of 5 of Clint's guitars that all had the same outfit was by mixing and matching until they just got on 5 that sounded the same.
Okay, I got it.
So because we pick this one and this pickup and this preamp and put it in that guitar, and then we go to the shelf and get another one, and we would get guitars with 4 or 5 different outputs. Doesn't matter if you own 1 guitar. Might not even matter if you own 2. But when you were Clint Black on an arena stage and you have one front of house guy and they're plugging you into the same channel, it became an impediment, right? And so I'm talking about fine tuning this, and so then David said, gosh, I might have to talk to David actually. But he said, I'd like Rupert Neve to help us. Rupert Neve, right?
Of course, who wouldn't?
Yeah. And he contacted him. And Rupert came. He was alive and still viable and had a bright mind. And so for people listening that don't know Rupert Neve's name, he was really the inventor of the mixing console. And he made the mixing consoles to record the Beatles. And Neve mixing consoles and preamps became known as the icon, the best.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
For
a place to have Neve consoles.
Pardon me?
For a place to have a studio to have Neve consoles.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
And he made a preamp that a lot of studios would use when they would mix down from multi-channel to stereo. And there was these 2 preamps, I don't remember the model names, and they had no knobs except an on, and you plug in and you plug out. And what came out the back end sounded better than what came in the front end. He just knew how to put stuff together, put electronics together that were musical. And his whole philosophy was musical, not like good sound, like musical sound. Mm-hmm. And he used transformers, and he wasn't using tubes. He was using good transistors, but transformers were the thing, you know. And there was even where they were made, like what copper was made in England that wound the transformers. You know, it's kind of like what water is in a bagel or beer, you know, like what's the good one is just happens to have that water there. So there was this idea that Rupert taught us that quality sound, musical sound, lives in the environment of low impedance. You can't have great musical sound in high impedance. Well, we bought into that because, why, it's true. And so we made a sensor that vibrated and a pickup that fit underneath our fingerboard. Hey, we had an NT neck. We could unbolt a neck, put a pickup under there, and bolt the neck back on. There's just, David Hostler and I used to always say, never underestimate the power of invention. We never thought in a million trillion years that our removable neck could be a place for a magnetic pickup.
Yeah.
Right? So magnets sound good. Well, we did that. This was a magnetic sensor. We designed it. It was great. It leaked its ferrofluid out of it, even though we sent all the stuff off to these labs. We spent a ton of money to say, is this Lexan cup compatible with this glue and this cap to hold this ferrofluid? Yeah, they charged us thousands of dollars to run tests and says it's certified to be the same. And then we made them. And of course they leaked, you know, they ate away the glue and we had to solve it's the same kind of stuff that Lloyd went through.
Yeah.
People would I got this brown runny stuff in my guitar and it sounds funny. It's rattly. Well, we had a magnet inside a cup with a coil around it, and it was suspended with this fluid that's magnetic, and it put the magnet in the middle, right? And so it wouldn't hit any edges, and it moved nicely. And so the technology was neat. It sounded wonderful. If you played it quiet, if you played it solo, if you played it not on a big stage, but it was too live. And we had a tip ring sleeve low impedance cable coming out, and then people still wanted to put them in a direct box. You couldn't, you know, but you don't need it. You could run it all the way to the board. Literally, we weren't able to teach the world that. And if you EQ'd it the exact same way that you would EQ a piezo that was under a saddle, it sounded awful. But people were like, no, we don't want to EQ it differently. And then we designed our 3 knobs, which you see now, and the idea of that was that no matter what technology changes, I've always felt, well, I didn't always feel that way, but we had these, they're referred to as barn doors, you know, the door with the battery and the sliders, a hole in the side of the guitar, and you're thinking, what are you going to do when that becomes obsolete? But I always thought, from that point forward, I thought, well, hardware on a guitar is a legitimate thing. There's hardware on electric guitars. So how about having 3 little discrete knobs that are low profile that you can move with your finger without touching them because they're rubberized? And it could just be part of the hardware that's on a guitar, like a strap button. We put the battery down on the end. By the end strap, I saw in a chat room a guy complaining about that because he had to take his strap off to change the battery, right? And you know, sorry, but I thought that was a good idea.
Supposed you to don't your strings off to change it.
Yeah, you don't see it. You didn't buy. We're buying a guitar supposed to last generations, and I was always afraid that if we're not careful, we're going to turn an acoustic guitar that could be 100 years old one day. We could turn it into the category of consumer electronics because of the pickup. Oh, we wanted to make something that lasted. And so we went through different evolutions of that. And now we're on our expression system 2, or is it 3? 2.
Yep.
And it was another one of David's ideas of sensing off the back of the saddle. And it sounds wonderful for some situations and for some artists. When you get on the biggest, giantest, loudest stages, it's too live.
Yeah.
We'll admit it. It's microphonic. It's not a microphone, but the top moves and it moves and the strings move. I did a gig the other night, first gig I've done for a while, and it was a big band, and we were at the Magnolia Theater, and I played acoustic guitar, and when I wasn't playing, my strings were moving. My top was moving, right? I mean, you could just look down and see the strings vibrating because the stage volume is high, and the guitar is microphonic, and so TJ came up. TJ was someone who worked for us years ago. We talked about him in early episodes. He said, the guitar on a big stage needs to be, he called it a tuned shaker, right? It's like, you kind of want a shaker, but you want it to be able to play chords, right? Because there's so much going on that stage that a microphonic guitar doesn't work. So the development of the ES took years. It's still under development, but the key to that, or the thing that I think is curious, is we were willing to do anything. We were willing to modify our guitar if the pickup belonged to us. In other words, put something under our fingerboard. But if an OEM person said, hey, if you change this brace a little bit on your guitar, I could make a pickup, we'd be like, we're not changing our brace for you. So guys that are making OEM stuff, they're up against, their creativity is stifled by what their customers will allow them to put in their guitar. And I never realized that until we had ideas for our own guitars and our own pickups, and we were willing to work it out, right? And go in there, take the neck off, route a little place, put a pickup underneath there. And if somebody else had asked us to do that for their pickup, I guarantee you we'd have said, no, we're not interested in doing that. So that's the part of vertical integration. You're willing to be creative across multiple platforms in order for something to come together as a whole and work. And so, and we have a good pickup now. It's reliable. It always works. It doesn't just fail randomly, It's usually a battery or just a little connection, but we have something that's reliable. It doesn't decay. It doesn't have some part that one day just won't work anymore. And yet, we're in the middle of designing a whole nother system that fits in the same holes that could possibly be a better system for a loud arena concert. And loud arena is the volume that humans have never heard before in all of humankind. People are subjected to volumes that for the however many thousands of years humans have existed, they didn't even hear it during the Beatles ages. Yeah. It was like 3 Super Beatle amplifiers in the middle of Balboa Stadium rocking on a little tiny stage trying to fill a stadium, and now it's just loud. It's loud.
Did you just see there's a Super Beetle sitting right outside here?
Yeah.
That's cool. We'll just see. So we introduced it to the market in early 2000.
Was that right? When it was?
Yeah, 2003. Yep.
And it was hard. We had to fix a lot of pickups. But here's the one thing that was heartwarming for me was, while somebody's pickup failed, if I looked at the chat rooms then, it was like, yeah, but it's a Taylor and they'll take care of you. That was the overall sentiment.
My next question is, how did you deal with those failures?
Well, over the years, we built an incredible service network out in the field. And we bring these guys that are independent into our factory for a week of training to become a level, like let's say a level 321 or 123. There's a beginning, an intermediate, and a highest level. I think we call them platinum and gold and silver or something like that now. And one of the first things that we teach them is that our neck isn't glued on, so you don't have to get out the steamer and then find out that there's bolts in there, right? I mean, if you're fixing your dishwasher, you want to find out how you take that thing off, because there's usually some hidden screw that you don't know about, and you break it before you find it. So you go on YouTube, right? Yep. Yeah. And so we teach them that, and we teach them about our pickup systems, and we could send new parts immediately, get somebody into a local place. They have those parts replaced with the newer, better part. And we also had upgrade paths to go. We even made molds to hold our preamp and our knobs in the old square cutouts on old guitars. So if someone wants to upgrade to our pickup. And there are some people that take our pickups out of their guitar and put a bags in because they like it better, right? And, the things that I say like that, they seem so like anti-marketing, but we're just one of the guitars on the market. And we're a good one. And to some people, we're the best. But there's a lot of choice. People are used to that with electric guitars. They buy electric guitars, and they'll swap hardware on that many times.
When it's a brand new guitar.
With a brand new guitar.
Yep.
Yeah. And I expect them to do that a little bit with ours, too.
So we introduced it on our, what we used to call our glossies. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
And we left the Fishman on the satins, and it didn't work because our customers wanted the new Taylor pickup on everything.
Across the board.
So that lasted just a month or two before we had to put them in the satins too.
Yeah. And by the way, I listen to most guitars on television now. Gibson's, Martin's, ours, other people's, and ours are the only ones that have our pickups in it. But what I hear on TV or in a concert now, amplified, across everything, bags, everything, is so much better than what I used to hear 20 years ago on television, when guitars plugged in sounded a lot more like, I would say, a kazoo. And now they sound pretty good. Everybody has gotten better. Fishman's making great stuff. Bags is making great stuff. Bags makes great preamps and sort of these modeler things. And I can't remember all the names of all this stuff. I know it exists and I know it sounds good. Yeah. So the rise of Taylor guitars over the years is also coincident with the rise of the industry. I think we had a lot to do with pushing the industry to get better, right? But sometimes they push back and we have to get better.
Yep.
So we talk about electrifying an acoustic. Now let's take it forward to the T5, where you're acoustifying an electric, so to speak.
Yeah.
Was that 2005?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, we quit making that big bass, and we had this expression system that actually sounded pretty good on a bass. We made that the big AB1, AB2, 3.
AB2, yeah.
And so we made a hollow body, carved out block with a top on it. And we put a big bass neck on it, one of those AB1 necks on it, and we put an expression system in, and it sounded really, really good. And so we made a few more prototypes, thinking maybe we could make an acoustic bass. And then, like I do a lot, I look at it and I go, that should actually be a guitar. We shouldn't make a bass, we should make a guitar. And we had that idea. That was the fastest product development we'd ever done.
And you didn't start with the ukulele this time.
I didn't start with the ukulele, started with a bass. And the T5 had 3 pickups, the same one under the fingerboard that we had on our acoustic, the same sensor on the top that we have on our acoustic, and then the middle one, right? So really, those things were stacked humbuckers. You could combine them. It was this 5-way switch. And this, again, was a David Hostler-headed project, right? He had these ideas. They were good ideas. But the amazing thing about that is we designed, tooled, and got it into production from September of 2004 to NAMM Show 2005 in January. That was the fastest we'd
Wow.
ever done anything. You know how long it takes us to get something, and that was 3 months.
Yeah, yeah.
And were you working at Guitar Center then?
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
on Musician's Friends side.
Musicians
Boy,
friends
did
side.
sales of that ever take off. That was unbelievable.
We and Guitar Center, because Keith was at Guitar Center at the time, we launched that. I had
Guitar
the
Center
catalog and
up,
online
yeah.
side, and Keith had the store side, and it just sold out in a day. We couldn't get enough.
We had to increase that
We're making
production.
50 a day.
We made 50 a day of those things. We made 10,000 of those the first year we made them, and 10,000 the next year we made. Folks, that's a lot of
It was
guitars.
unbelievable.
And then it's satisfied. There's always this big bump. I think I told the production story of the baby Taylor, which was, and I'll tell it again. It was 10 a day, 20 a day, 30, 40, 50, 56, all the way up to 100 a day, then 90 a day, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, none a day, and then none a day, none a day, none a day, then 10 a day, then 20 a day. And you're trying to figure out what that run rate is, right? And I think the last time I told the story, I said, and now we've made 70 of those a day for 20 years, something like that. And I think, and then we made the GS Mini because I thought that would replace the baby. Maybe we're doing 40 a day of the babies. We did the GS Mini and we ended up doing 70. Now it's a little bit lower, but same thing happened with the T5. And I remember saying that this is a model, maybe it's a category. It looked like it for 2 years, but in reality, it's a model. And I go, what's a good selling model in the glossies, which are the gloss finish?
500s and
500s.
500s and up. Those were the glossies. Now a lot of those are satins or special finishes too, But a good model would be 10 a day, 12 a day. When we made that, I thought if we could sell between 10 and 15 of these a day, I think it'd be a success. Well, gosh, once you get used to 50 a day of them for 2 years, making 10 a day seems like a failure. So I guess we failed. But we've been making about a dozen, 13, between 10 and 13 of those, of T5s, T5Zs, the whole family, for 15 years. It's a nice model.
Yeah.
And what surprises me is so many people come up to me and go, oh, I have a Taylor. And I finally got my T5. I've wanted a T5 for so long. And then other people, again, because I just always like to recognize both sides. They're like, that guitar's a solution where there wasn't a problem, kind of a thing, The haters will always hate.
Yep.
And they don't have to hate. It's just fine to not be into something. And I read those comments. It's fine that someone's not into it. There are a lot of people that love their T5. It really performs for them. And that's been a good guitar. It's been reliable too. We had trouble with the 5-way switch because we had to invent it and get someone to make it. And I remember the first 5 or 10,000 of them, we had to set up a work center and rebuild every one of those. Give them the love that they needed so that they would work reliably because the manufacturer didn't get it right. And then finally we worked with them to get it right.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
But that was that was like the biggest thing in the industry when we came out with that, the sales and people jumping on board and copying it. It was like the biggest news in the industry when we came out with that.
Crafter had a copy of it like the next NAMM show. I walked by, I was like, well, that's not a T5. It was an interesting, it was a great guitar. We love them. And now it's been completely
we finally
renewed.
revised it. It was pretty long in the tooth. We did an upgrade on it. And you wanna then transition to the solid body electrics?
Oh, the solid body electrics that we did. Well, we thought we were riding high on that, and we got caught unprepared because, as you and Dave mentioned, that Guitar Center was the one that got to launch it. And I remember a day when Keith Brawley said, Bob, we feel like you took us to the dance floor and left us standing there because they sold every guitar we gave them. We couldn't make enough. We were only making 20, 30 a day, and they needed 50, and we were starting to open up other dealers.
Yeah, we were starting to open other dealers because it was just, they had an exclusive for a while, but then we're going to start selling to other dealers. So Keith was Guitar Center wasn't happy with us.
They weren't happy with us. We gave them a runaway hit, but not enough of it.
Yeah, we couldn't fill all the demand they had. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to fill all the demand rather than other dealers fill demand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course they do. We had ideas for a solid body electric, all new. We made all the hardware, made the pickups, made the tail pieces, all kinds of the bridge. It was really neat stuff. Well, we didn't want to get caught unprepared with our pants down on that and not have enough. So we bought all these minimum order quantities of this stuff. And we made those guitars. We tooled for it. And they sold well at the beginning, not like the T5, and it didn't last as long. And, in the end, I remember sitting there with just call me Frank, right? Because I'm sitting with 45 dealers. Any questions? Yeah. How come you quit making the solid bodies? It's like, well, because they didn't sell. Any questions? And like, just own it.
Yeah.
Just own it.
Yeah.
Move on. Right. And I think, what did we have? We had a couple thousand of those in stock, and we lasered a not for sale for educational purposes only or something. We donated them to schools to teach. And there'll be some kid who's the next Slash or something that's going to learn on that, have stolen it from school, ran away from home. He'll be famous. The next thing you know, that'll be the guitar people want to play music on, because you never know. You just never know.
Yeah, it came down to looking at the inventory. They weren't selling what it would take to sell the inventory to stores in terms of discount. But then it's not enough to sell it to the stores because you want it to sell all the way through. In other words, you don't want to give your problem to someone else. Mm-hmm. You want to solve the big problem and have it in the hands of consumers that want it. So then we looked at, what would be the difference of instead donating them to like teaching studios and taking the tax right off? Mm-hmm. And that was favorable, and it just seemed a better thing for the brand to do. Mm-hmm. Rather than go through all that with the discontinuing and the deep discounts, that would have been really ugly.
Yeah.
And I'm curious why. I've talked with Andy about this quite a bit. Well, I don't know if you have as well, in terms of why that guitar didn't work.
I haven't talked with Andy about it, but it wasn't... It to me, from what if I talk to Rob McGargle, who's been working with us forever, he's like, that's my favorite electric guitar. I play it everywhere all the time. So there's always something different.
Of course.
But to me, it's a combination of things. Number one, it was a Taylor. I think it's just it was the wrong brand. I don't think we're really allowed to do that. It's against Fender and Gibson. If that guitar was one of the first electric guitars that ever hit the market, people would have liked it. They worked. But it was probably a little too clean, a little too not the right vibe. The tone wasn't what people wanted to hear. Sometimes I get the impression that it was a little bit more like our acoustic guitar is to other like traditional guitars, and where players wanted a guitar that they could dig in a little bit more to. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a good enough electric guitar player to evaluate that thing. I'm curious what Andy has told you about it.
Yeah. Well, it was uninspiring.
There you go. I think that's the word.
Yeah, uninspiring. It was a well-made guitar by an acoustic guitar company, and it was uninspiring. And a lot of guitars are uninspiring. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've a few electric guitars by famous guitar companies that are equally uninspiring, but because they're the brand, people buy them. And, a lot of players, people buying things, they're not a good enough player to be at that level of where, am I inspired by it or not? I mean, it's good enough for what they do, but the goal is really to make something that will be the one that someone wants to pick up and play. And I'm talking about a good player, right? And, you can put things out into the market. There's only so much we can do as a guitar company to put things out into the market. We can't predeign something will be a huge success because it takes the artist. It takes the artist that decides I love this guitar. I'm inspired by this guitar. I'm making music with this guitar. The music reaches the masses. People are inspired by that music and want to play that music. So, I mean, we can only get so far with it. Then the artist has to do the other part. An example are like with Gibson Company. They did the Les Paul. I mean, the most prized Les Paul is what, the 59?
Yep.
Well, they didn't sell, and they discontinued them, right? So they did their part, but then it took the artists years later picking up that guitar and doing their part and creating the music that inspired others and created social change for people to want to play that music and play that guitar, right?
Right.
So it's similar for us. So that guitar didn't do that. Not only that, and when he was working on Powers Electric, I was encouraging him to, as you were, to make what he really wanted. That would inspire him because he's a great player. Mm-hmm. And then part of what I added to it was, we can't have any Taylor trade dress. It's just wrong. Mm-hmm. It's just wrong. It can't be. No one wants a Taylor electric guitar. A few Taylor loyalists, yeah, they want it, but they're a teeny part of the market. It can't have any Taylor trade dress because it's a different culture. It's a completely different culture. So I think we have a lot better shot at making something now that'll find its way into musicians' hands, that it becomes their go-to guitar, one of their go-to guitars that they want to play and create music with. And I think we've gotten on that path. That's a good path.
Yeah, we're jumping ahead a little bit because we haven't talked about Powers Electric, and we should probably introduce it properly later. But on the same vein, when Andy was talking, Andy was so involved even with the logo, working with our art department.
Yeah.
But in the end, I just kept encouraging him to do what he wants to do with the logo.
Yeah.
And one day I said, Andy, I think if you weren't here at Taylor, that you would start a guitar company to make this guitar. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't start a guitar company from scratch to make Taylor acoustic guitars. You wouldn't go rent a building and start something, go through the pain of it to make the guitars that we're making now. But you would start a company, you would bleed and invest and work and do all the work to make this guitar happen, this electric guitar. Yeah. And he goes, yeah, I would. I go, that's how much you love this guitar. And everything about this guitar should be about you.
Yep, totally.
Because you would start a company to make it. So I encourage you to be the final answer to everything that's on it. Mm-hmm. Not let someone else go, well, I think my idea is a little better than yours. And we're the department that does that. It's like none of that.
Yep.
Because you can have that if you wouldn't, if it's like you win a few, you lose a few, but no, this one has got to be 100% Andy's decision, and that's why it's special.
Yep, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So more on that later, but that's the
story of the solid body electric.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll get to that in later podcasts.
Yeah. Just another part of Powers Electric, though, we're very careful about not getting production ahead of demand. No sales forecast for it. And that's hard to, move people's thinking of the executives that work on these things to have it be just like, no sales forecast. We're doing this. We need to find the dealers who want to tell the story, put it in the hands of people that, are going to love it, and then let it build organically from there. Mm-hmm. It's the only right way to do it long term.
Yeah,
that's right. And we're doing it for the love of it and the musicality of it and the future of it, because we're giving birth to it now. And that guitar is one expensive guitar to make. That we spend more making the knobs on that guitar than we spend making a guitar, It's like you planting trees. Yeah. It's
for the future.
But that's the beauty of this, the economy of scale that we get, that I talked about. We can absorb that to put this thing out. And you hear about a lot of new products in other industries where they go, when it gets to scale, we'll make money. Right now, it's just a labor of love. When we make every one of those bridges out of solid billet, when we pour resin to cut little squares and putting on it to make those knobs, when we make that wiggle stick that we have to bend and chrome and put the stuff on, and when we make, everything on that guitar we make because we don't want any minimum order quantities from some company, because it might evolve a little bit as it goes. B, we want it done just how we want it done. We want it done exactly how small batch production. And we love making stuff, which is actually a total addiction to make stuff. It's why we make those pickups. It's why we make our guitars, it's why we plant trees, it's why we make guitars with urban wood, and why we make our cases, and why we make our tools, and we build our factory, we run our own electricity, we take care of our own, HVAC. We love making stuff. And so this guitar is fun because we're making things you normally would buy, right? And I just love it. And I love seeing something that Andy took from conception to paper to a real product.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Powers Electric, because the story didn't end with the Taylor solid body electric.
No, that was a misstep.
The full arc is including Powers as part of the story too. So
exactly, we would have no business making a solid body electric guitar. Andy does. We wouldn't.
That's right.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I suppose we can pick up next time when Mr. Powers joined the company.
Yeah, we're all the way up to there.
Yeah. Unless you want to talk about automated side bending or...
just briefly...
robot buffing.
Briefly, these guitars that we build a brand for is symbiotic with making them. Both of them go hand in hand. We can't make them unless we can sell them. We can't sell them unless we can make them. One of my goals early on, from being a poor as a church mouse guitar maker, Kurt and I not making guitars, was to not be embarrassed by being a guitar maker, not have to have a qualifier, after that, feel like that people that work for us could earn a living, that there was careers to be had there, that we could hold our heads high. And in order to do that, in the United States, paying our wages and our overheads and all of this, you've got to add technology. Otherwise, I had a friend, his name was Michael Dresner. He worked for Martin for years. He designed their A-frame bracing and some of their, I think maybe it was their Road Series guitars. And he was a good, really good guy. And he said, well, we talked about handmade versus machine made. He says, well, people, they like to buy theater, the theater of making a guitar. It's like, if they want to buy the theater of making a guitar, we can give them the theater. We make it by hand, but they're going to have to pay for that theater. They're going to have to buy a show ticket for that and buy the guitar, And I always thought that was a good way of looking at it. So when we add technology, because of the industry we're in, it's rare and it's notable. And people stand up because it's being done for the first time. But all of the things that we do now are so more normal in our industry than they used to be. Yeah, we were the first acoustic guitar maker to use a CNC 3-axis mill, but it was at the beginning when they were even available. They weren't 2 years ago. Before that, they weren't even available for somebody else to step out. Tom Anderson is the one who turned me on to them, and I just took to that like fish to water, and I love that. So we continue. And like I said earlier, why should you bend sides on a pipe with a barbecue lighter in it when you can make a machine to do it? And a lot of these machines cost a fortune and take a long time. A lot of our projects take 2 or 3 years to implement, with half of our tooling staff working on just one suite of machines. And if you walk through our Tecate factory and our El Cajon factory and you look around at all of the special tooling that you can't even train your eyes on anything without seeing it everywhere. That all comes out of that one little machine shop, tooling shop in the 2010 building. It's not very big, and they've made every single thing that makes our factory work. George Gruen came out to visit our factory once. I brought him out. We spent a whole weekend together. I took him to the zoo. We looked at snakes and lizards. We had a good time. We looked at plants. Our zoo, San Diego Zoo, has more money in plants than they have in animals. So George...
A bigger collection.
Yeah. And George loves that stuff. And then for those listening who might not know, George Gruen is a great purveyor of guitars, knows vintage guitars, seen a lot of factories, great dealer in Nashville. And we got up into the room where the side bending was happening, and that was really one of the last things we were looking at. And it was evening, and he looked around and he goes, "Bob, nobody's going to catch up with you. Do you know why?" And I go, "Well," he goes, "Like me to answer?" And I go, "Yeah." And he says, "Because they don't have what you have, and they don't have any way to get it." Right? And I thought, yeah. But I'm going to say that every year that becomes less true, that more people have. They might not have what I have because it takes what's in here for the whole complement of what we have. It's not just the material things, it's the wishes and attitudes and dreams to make those material things come into being, right? So you can't just get the guitar and then play like an incredible guitar player just because you have the guitar. You can't just buy microphones and run a good studio because you have good microphones, right? You have to have what's inside there for that to work. But I will say that technology is speeding up, and people can have what we have if they have the oomph to get it. Mm-hmm. So side benders and all that stuff, to me, it's become less novel or less braggable than it was when I first made them, only because the whole world is changing. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, well, we should be expected to be able to develop robotic polishing machines that take the load off of people's backs and arms and wrists and do a fine job of doing that stuff. When we first did it, it was like wizardry, you know. It was like unbelievable. But now it's to be expected.
Kind of table stakes.
Yeah, it is. It's table stakes. And that's good because it makes you have to push for the next new thing. And like I say, it might be that we build a guitar school, you know, where you teach people how to be luthiers so that they can do their job better. Who knows what it will be? Mm-hmm. But there's technology, there's wood modification, there's planting trees, healing some forests, and that's got to be part of guitar building too. So anyway, it's just interesting for me to view our factory and how I feel about it, to where some of these things, the innovations in the factory that we talked about for years, are becoming, like you put it, table stakes. If you want to play, you got to get that out there. Mm-hmm. And what George said, I thought was a great description, but I think that almost every day it's becoming less true.
Well, it's also, you know, what things he's talked about, maybe they were like wizardry when he first did them, but they were in use in a lot of other industries, bigger industries. It was just, right, you know, to bring it down to our level. That's what was unique.
Yeah.
Guys, we covered a lot of ground today, and there's still so much ground to cover moving forward. I've enjoyed this immensely, as always, and really appreciate it.
Appreciate you putting the effort into it, because Kurt and I wouldn't sit down and just do this. Hey, Kurt, let's get together and talk about stuff. Can't do it without you, Dave.
Well, it's just me sitting here trying not to ask stupid questions, and that's what makes it fun. No, it's great stuff. Yeah, we'll kick it off with when Andy joined the company next time, and like you were saying, that's a great story in itself. So yeah, we've got a lot of ground to cover.
We do, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Great stuff.